The collapse of the National Theatre of Wales, the NTW, is not merely a tragedy for the arts, but a revealing symptom of a deeper failure inherent in the process of devolution itself. The National Theatre of Wales was founded in 2009, and it was imagined as a cultural beacon for Wales and for the Welsh, producing landmark events like the Passion with Michael Sheen, which captivated 25,000 spectators over 72 hours. Yet in 2023, its funding was withdrawn by the Arts Council of Wales under the pretext of creating a self-sustaining model, a contradiction for a national institution designed to represent Welsh culture, which should be funded by the Welsh government. NTW's demise is now a stark reminder of how devolution often fails to deliver on its bold promises. And the late Enoch Powell, who is so often vilified, I don't like a lot of the things he says. The rivers of blood thing was disturbing, but he was putting his finger on an issue which has become an issue of debate. And when it came to devolution, when that was first being discussed in my childhood in the late 1960s, he said power devolved is power retained. And that idea looms large over the discussion, particularly as Angela Rayner talks about a new wave of devolution. Far from empowering local institutions, devolution often consolidates control in a new bureaucratic centre, leaving key decisions detached from the needs of those that they claim to serve. In Wales, the Arts Council's funding choices reflect broader political priorities, supporting controversial initiatives such as drag cabarets and a museum of decolonisation, and at the expense of preserving national cultural icons and national cultural language and national cultural theatre. And this shift reveals a troubling dynamic. Devolved administrations ostensibly created to decentralise power replicate the centralised model that they were meant to replace, prioritising ideology over practicality. I'm speaking as somebody who taught in Wales for a time. So Wales is sort of dear to me and is also in my family. And the NTW's fate underscores the fragility of devolved governance structure. I must say on that point, my family background, well, at least one part of my family is either Welsh, is Welsh and Scottish. There's no part of my family which is English, as far as I know. So I should be. I've also got a strong Irish bit and a strong East European bit, but no English bit as such. So I put my cards on the table. But in theory, devolution promises localized solutions tailored to specific communities. But in practice, it often lacks the financial autonomy or the strategic coherence to sustain vital public goods. It's not unique to Wales. Scotland's devolution has faced similar criticisms, with public services like education and healthcare stagnating under its watch. These failures suggest that moving power away from Westminster does not inherently translate into improved outcomes. It frequently results in a new layer of inefficiency, a new layer of mismanagement. Angela Rayner's recent proposals for a new wave of English devolution, consolidating local councils into mega authorities, risk perpetuating the same pitfalls, as well as it risks not having elections next year, undermining the nature, the function and the efficiency and the visible iconography of democracy. It's sold as a means of giving regions a bigger voice and then silences that voice. These reforms threaten to centralise decision-making in a new bureaucratic entity, effectively bypassing local voters. Like the assemblies in Cardiff and in Edinburgh, these bodies may claim to represent their communities while serving interests of a political centre. And that political centre is just a replication of the stuff in Westminster, but perhaps with a different motive to impose its power elsewhere. The NTW's collapse serves as a cautionary tale. Devolution, poorly executed, erodes, doesn't establish trust. and it undermines rather than protects the very institutions it was set up to service. In the broader context of Welsh devolution, NTW's story reflects a misplaced emphasis on rhetorical ideals over practical governance. And while Welsh Labour champions anti-racist and LGBTQ plus action plans as makers and markers of progress, the sidelining of NTW reveals a failure to reconcile these aspirations with the genuine preservation of cultural heritage, of Welsh cultural heritage, which it was set up to supervise and to encourage. Such contradictions weaken public faith in devolved institutions as they appear driven by political agenda rather than the need for their constituencies. Devolution's proponents must grapple with this fundamental paradox. True local empowerment, true local government requires not only the delegation of power, but also accountability, financial sustainability, and a focus on core public priorities of the people that it represents. Without these elements, devolution becomes an exercise in political theatre, an illustration, an illusion, a fantasy of autonomy, while real power remains firmly in the hands of a centralised elite that just goes from one central location to another. It's about bureaucracy, it's not about empowerment, it's not about the people. It's about paper shufflers. And for Wales, the collapse of its national theatre should prompt urgent reflection on whether its devolutionary model is actually fit for purpose or merely a facade masking deeper structural failure.